Hi, thank you for taking time to watch this week's reflection from the parish of Broa Wistley. I hope you enjoy it and that it gives you something to think about. By the time you're watching this, we'll know the outcome of the UK election, and politicians will be back at work trying to find the best way to govern the country on our behalf. However, at the time of recording, election day is still to come, and we're still in the limbo of nearly but not yet, waiting to see who will win. The past few weeks have been awash with a mixture of manifesto promises and exaggerated criticism of their rivals' shortcomings. Sadly, that's often what politics is about, painting your own policies in the most positive light while sowing the seeds of doubt about what others are promising to do. I don't think anybody likes the negativeness of it all, but politicians need to establish what makes them different from their opponents. Their hope is that, despite the negativity, the result will make them more appealing than their rivals. With most of the main parties clustering round the centre ground of politics, a certain amount of negativity is almost inevitable as each party tries to create distance between otherwise very similar policies. It's only at the extremes where the policies really stand out as being significantly different. That being said, elections always bring a sense of hope with them. We hope that the party we prefer will win. We hope that they will deliver on their promises and avoid the predicted shortcomings. We hope for a government that will make things better for us as individuals and for society as a whole. Of course, only time will tell. As the newly elected government begins to put words into practice, we will judge them on their real-world performance. We'll judge them on whether their acts match their words. Will there be any substance behind those manifesto promises? Will any of the dire warnings come true? Or was it all just foolish boasting? Politics in the early church was no different. When Paul wrote his second letter to the Corinthians, there were rival factions within the church who were canvassing support for a different understanding of the Christian gospel. Both sides were busy putting political spin on their messages to explain why their position was better than the other. It's clear from Paul's letters that his opponents were trying to undermine what he had been teaching. They were saying that Paul's version of the gospel was not the real one. At least some of the new converts seemed to be swayed by their arguments because it created deep divisions among the fledgling Christian community, the converts that Paul loved and had struggled so hard for. As many politicians do, Paul's opponents claimed historical precedents for their argument and belittled him as a bringer of risky and unwanted change. They appealed to traditional values, claiming that Paul's interpretation was radical and untried. "Don't rock the boat," they said. "We're a safe pair of hands. Those foreigners can't become children of God unless they conform to the old traditions." They undermined Paul's teaching so much that they threatened to destroy everything that Paul saw as essential to the gospel message. It's therefore hardly surprising that he fought back with a bit of mudslinging of his own. In his letter to the Philippians, he wrote, "Watch out for those dogs, those evildoers, those mutilators of the flesh." I think that's a bit harsh to describe his opponents in that way, but sometimes it's necessary to make people stop and think. However, this was no mere attention-grabbing soundbite. It was supported by sound theological argument based on both Paul's extensive knowledge of the Hebrew Bible and his understanding of contemporary theology. It's an extensive argument that fills many chapters of his multiple letters to those fledgling Christian communities. It was obviously a powerful theological argument, for it won the day over his opponents and has stood the test of time, because even now it underpins the whole of Christianity. Part of Paul's success was that he was convinced that his personal encounter with the risen Christ gave extra weight to his argument. His whole understanding changed when Jesus appeared to him on the road to Damascus and revealed to him the radical inclusivity of God's love for all people. As Paul wrestled with this newfound insight, he realized that it came not as an overturning of Jewish tradition, but as a completion and fulfillment of ancient biblical promises. He came to believe that everything else paled into insignificance compared to what he discovered about Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. He was convinced that these new insights were so life-changing and world-improving that he had to defend them. So, in order to counter the allegations of his opponents, he was forced to remind his readers about his own religious background. His origins as a Pharisee and Hebrew-born of Hebrews marked him as somebody with impeccable religious credentials, and his earlier persecution of the Christian church demonstrated unparalleled zeal for the traditions of his faith. The clarity of his visions and revelations of the Lord was something that most Christians, even today, long to experience for themselves. However, instead of boasting about his background or about how privileged he was to have been caught up in these visions of God, he preferred to let his life speak for itself. He preferred to demonstrate the truth about God, not only by what he said and taught, but by the way he lived his life. He wrote, "I refrain from boasting, so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me." Such obvious authenticity and humility is something to be admired, and we could do with a touch of it in some of our modern politicians. The electorate would perhaps have a lot more faith in politicians if more of them lived their lives as a true reflection of their stated beliefs, if their manifesto promises were more than just vote-winning people-pleasers. The problem is that true authenticity of character goes beyond what we say we stand for. Everyday practice needs to reflect deepest principles, and that's true for us as well as our politicians. In fact, it's perhaps doubly true for us as Christians, because we live in the nearly but not yet of God's kingdom. Jesus has already won the victory, and it is up to us to live out the values that he has promised lie at the heart of God's manifesto. We live in hope and trust of them coming true, and we pray that, whatever its colour, our new government will take those values to heart too. Thank you for listening.